48 hours. The Hormuz Escalation. Chapter 1. The $2 million toll. April 19th, 6:14. Local time. The Minerva Thalia, a Maltese-flagged chemical tanker carrying 42,000 metric tons of methanol, had been transiting the Strait of Hormuz on a standard eastbound lane when the radio crackled with something that was not a weather advisory. 3 vessels, running without AIS transponders, emerged from the Iranian coastal shadow at high speed. They closed the distance in under 4 minutes. By 06:18, the tanker's engines were dead in the water and her crew of 22 was face down on the deck. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had just collected its toll. Tactical deep dive. Fast inshore attack craft doctrine. The vessels used in this intercept are classified as fast inshore attack craft, or FIACs. Iran operates over 1,500 of these platforms, ranging from locally produced Blade Runner 51 derivatives to Chinese-origin Type 62 gunboats. They displace between 5 and 25 tons, reach speeds of 50 to 70 knots, and carry a lethal mix of heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and C-704 anti-ship missiles. Their doctrine is swarm-based. Overwhelm a larger target with speed, noise, and geometric complexity. Any single FIAC is killable. 30 simultaneous FIACs present a fire control mathematics problem that even advanced naval systems struggle to solve. More critically, under Article 17 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the 1982 Montego Bay Convention, all vessels enjoy the right of innocent passage through international straits. The Strait of Hormuz, at its narrowest point just 33 kilometers wide, is classified as such a strait. What the IRGC executed at 06:18 was not a maritime inspection. It was piracy dressed in a military uniform, a direct violation of international law that 168 signatory nations have agreed to uphold. Tehran, characteristically, called it a customs enforcement action. Washington called it an act of war. Chapter 2. The Collapse. April 20th, 11:47, Zulu. The Omani-brokered ceasefire had lasted 9 hours and 43 minutes. Its death came not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic silence. Iran's delegation simply stopped answering its phones in Muscat. By noon Zulu, signals intelligence out of Bahrain was tracking elevated radio traffic across 3 IRGC air defense sectors. The message was clear to anyone trained to read it. Iran was spinning up its integrated air defense network. The crown jewel of that network had just gone active. Tactical deep dive, the Bavar 373 vs. U.S. stealth doctrine. The Bavar 373 is Iran's domestically produced long-range surface-to-air missile system, unveiled in 2019 as Tehran's answer to the S-300. It claims an engagement envelope of 200 kilometers against aerial targets and 300 kilometers against ballistic missiles, using a phased array radar operating in the X and S band simultaneously. Against conventional aircraft, it is a credible threat. Against stealth platforms, the F-22 Raptor, the F-35, the B-21 Raider, the picture is more complicated. Stealth is not invisibility, it is radar cross-section reduction. An F-35 presents a radar signature approximately equal to a metal golf ball. At 200 kilometers, in a contested electronic warfare environment, detecting and tracking that golf ball consistently enough to achieve a fire control solution is an engineering problem Iran has not yet solved. U.S. strike packages entering Iranian airspace would lead with EA-18G Growlers conducting suppression of enemy air defenses, followed by JASSM-ER cruise missiles striking radar nodes before any manned aircraft crosses the border. The Bavar 373 is a deterrent. In a full-spectrum conflict, it is a target. Into this deteriorating environment, the President of the United States issued what his press secretary termed a strategic clarification. The term used in the actual presidential statement was total blockade, a naval interdiction of all Iranian petroleum exports, combined with explicit threats against dual-use infrastructure including the national power grid interconnects at Isfahan and Shiraz and the 4 major bridge crossings over the Karun River that supply logistics to Iran's southwestern industrial corridor. Whether these constituted legitimate military targets under the laws of armed conflict was a question international lawyers would debate for decades. In the moment, Tehran's Supreme National Security Council was given 12 hours to respond. They did not respond with words. Chapter 3. Naval Engagement. USS Mason, April 20th, 1933. Local, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. USS Mason was conducting freedom of navigation operations 28 nautical miles southeast of Ketchum Island when her Combat Information Center began tracking the contacts. Not 3, not 10. 47 distinct surface returns, all emerging from inshore waters, all accelerating on an intercept course. The swarm was on. Tactical deep dive. The Aegis combat system and its limits. The Aegis combat system, built around the AN-SPY 1D phased array radar and the Mk-41 vertical launch system, is the most sophisticated shipborne air and surface defense architecture ever deployed. It can simultaneously track over 100 targets and engage multiple threats in parallel. Against aircraft and missiles, it is without peer. Against surface swarms, the calculus changes. Aegis was designed for the vertical threat axis. FIACs operating at sea level present a fundamentally different geometric problem. They hug the radar horizon, they clutter the return with sea state noise, and they force the combat system to make engagement decisions measured in seconds. The Mason carried a loadout of Standard Missile-2 and evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, but neither weapon is optimized for a 10-ton speedboat doing 55 knots at 800 meters. For that problem, the ship relies on the Mark 45 5-inch 54 caliber naval gun. The Mark 45 fires a 32-kilogram projectile at 808 meters per second, achieving a rate of 20 rounds per minute. Its effective surface range against small craft exceeds 12 kilometers. On this evening, Mason's gun crew fired 14 rounds in warning configuration. Deliberate splashes ahead of the lead FIAC elements, before the swarm began its tactical dispersal. The engagement lasted 23 minutes. No IRGC vessel was sunk. No American sailor was killed. But the message transmitted across that 28 nautical miles of dark water was unambiguous. Operating above and behind the Mason throughout the engagement was a single SH-60 Seahawk helicopter, call sign Rescue 71. The Seahawk's role here was not rescue. Equipped with the AN/APS-153 multi-mode radar and the AN/AQS-22 sonar suite, it served as the ship's over-the-horizon targeting asset, extending the Mason's sensor range by 200 nautical miles, relaying targeting data in real time to the Combat Information Center below. It was the Seahawk crew that first identified the swarm's staging area near Larrick Island and calculated its intercept geometry 11 minutes before the contacts appeared on the ship's own radar. In modern naval warfare, the helicopter is not a support asset. It is the ship's forward eye, and without it, the Mason would have had 4 minutes to respond instead of 15. Chapter 4. The Hypersonic Shadow, April 20th, 22. Zulu. The NRO satellite pass at 22 bar Zulu produced imagery that moved through the intelligence pipeline at a speed usually reserved for nuclear alerts. At Bandar Abbas, on the northern shore of the strait, transporter Erector launchers were moving. Not the Shahab-3 ballistic missiles that American planners had wargamed for 20 years. Something newer. Something that the existing kill chain was not built to defeat. The Fattah-2 had left its garrison. Tactical deep dive, hypersonic glide vehicles, and the ABM problem. The Fattah-2 is Iran's claimed hypersonic ballistic missile, a system built around a hypersonic glide vehicle payload. Here is what that designation means in physical terms. A conventional ballistic missile follows a predictable parabolic arc. It goes up, it comes down, and a sufficiently fast computer can calculate where it will land approximately 90 seconds after launch. That predictability is what THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, and the Patriot PAC-3 are built to exploit. They are, in essence, solutions to a geometry problem. Intercept a known trajectory at a known altitude window. A hypersonic glide vehicle changes the geometry. Released from the ballistic missile's upper stage at altitudes between 40 and 80 kilometers, the HGV does not follow a parabolic arc. It glides, it maneuvers. It can alter its trajectory by hundreds of kilometers during terminal descent while maintaining speeds between Mach 5 and Mach 10, between 6,000 and 12,000 kilometers per hour. At those speeds, the HGV's skin temperature reaches 2,000 degrees Celsius, generating a plasma sheath that degrades radar returns. The combination of speed, maneuverability, and radar attenuation means that existing American ABM systems achieve intercept probability rates against confirmed HGVs of somewhere between 15 and 40%, depending on engagement geometry and the classification level of the assessment you are reading. THAAD was designed for a slower, more predictable world, The Fattah-2, if its claimed specifications are even 70% accurate, represents an operational gap in American force protection that has not yet been closed. The Pentagon knows this. Tehran knows the Pentagon knows this. That calculation is precisely why the launchers were moving in full view of the satellite. It was a message. Whether it was also a preparation was the question keeping the CENTCOM commander awake at MacDill Air Force Base at 3 in the morning. Chapter 5. The Global Choke, April 20th, 23:59 to hour 48. While the Mason stood down from general quarters and the satellite analysts worked through their second pot of coffee, the conflict's economic blast radius was already expanding at the speed of a financial data feed. In Shanghai, the SHFE crude futures contract had moved 34% in a single session, a move that triggered automated circuit breakers 3 times. In Brussels, an emergency session of the International Energy Agency was called for 06 were local, and in Riyadh, a phone call was placed from the Saudi Ministry of Energy to its counterpart in Beijing that lasted 41 minutes and was intercepted in its entirety by NSA collection assets. The call was about pipelines. Tactical Deep Dive, Bab-el-Mandeb and the Petroline. The global oil supply system has 2 physical choke points that, if simultaneously disrupted, produce economic consequences that no central bank can offset. The first is the Strait of Hormuz. 21 million barrels of petroleum products transit it daily, representing approximately 21% of global liquid fuel consumption. Close Hormuz and Europe begins rationing within 11 days. Close it for 30 days, and the arithmetic of industrial civilization becomes very uncomfortable. The second choke point is Bab-el-Mandeb, the 29-kilometer strait between Djibouti and Yemen, through which 6.2 million barrels per day transit on their way to the Suez Canal and the European market. Yemen's Houthi movement, supplied, trained, and strategically directed by the IRGC, has already demonstrated the capability and willingness to strike commercial shipping in this corridor. In the 48-hour window of the Hormuz escalation, Houthi command and control networks showed a spike in encrypted communications traffic consistent with pre-operational planning. Whether those preparations represented a coordinated second front or an opportunistic reading of the moment, the effect on insurance markets was identical. Lloyd's of London suspended war risk coverage for the entire Red Sea corridor at 23 GMT. The Saudi East-West pipeline, the Petroline, runs 200 kilometers from the Abqaiq processing facility on the Persian Gulf to the Yanbu export terminal on the Red Sea. It carries 5 million barrels per day and was constructed specifically as a bypass route for Hormuz closures. It is also, as every strategic planner in Riyadh and Washington is acutely aware, a 1,200-kilometer above-ground infrastructure target passing through terrain that is difficult to defend and easy to surveil, with commercial satellite imagery available to any actor with a credit card and an internet connection. China's concern in that 41-minute phone call was not philosophical. 60% of Saudi petroleum exports flow to Asia. China alone imports 1.8 million barrels per day from the kingdom. The math of Chinese industrial output, the math of Chinese political stability, and the math of what happens to the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy when factory workers in Guangdong cannot get to work because diesel has tripled in price. That math was running simultaneously in Beijing State Council and in every strategic planning cell across the region. War is not a clash of armies. It is a collision of supply chains. The Hormuz escalation, in its first 48 hours, had not yet produced a single confirmed military fatality on either side. It had, however, removed 27% of the world's seaborne petroleum from the calculable supply column, triggered the largest single-session crude price movement since 2008, and placed 4 nuclear-armed nations, the United States, Russia, China, and Israel, in direct communication about the behavior of a 5th state that was moving hypersonic missiles toward a coastline that controlled the breathing of the global economy. The 49th hour had not yet begun, and no one in any of those command centers, on any side of any border, was sleeping. Ground zero stories. The war is a calculation of physics, logistics, and willpower. This has been 48 hours, the Hormuz escalation.